things is that where the Lord's hand has gone out against us, then you get an affirmation of it because here's another incident, here's another headline. And so again, it's just that attitude of being in prayer, to see God's hand, and what I preached last week, God's power, which is what we're missing and so desperate in need of, is for God's power just to come down upon the church. But God's not going to send it unless the church seeks it. And that's kind of the problem that we're in right now. So Acts chapter 12, I want to give this account to you because I believe that this is a mirror reflection of something that we're walking through right now, going through. And you just got to love the book of Acts, the first church, all that it went through, that's going through, and just how God divinely intervened and worked in such a wonderful way. And again, the demonstration of the power of God that was shown and given to it. I want to read in Acts chapter 12. It is the answered prayer of Peter being released and how God did that through the church's prayer. And it is still my firm belief that if the church would pray rightly, with that spirit of urgency and fervency, that we would prevail. Now again, we've seen, and that's one of the things is that again, I was thinking about as our prayer time was going on this morning at 10:30, that the answer to prayers that we've seen. Little and big, you want to count it, it's all the same to me. But again, you just see God answering the prayers, miracles, mercies, and you just say, thank you, Lord, in that. Now again, to not recognize the answered prayers makes people just say, well, I keep asking, but I don't see anything. I sat in a Sunday school class, one of the churches that we did the prayer conference in, and this was a pastor's class. And so the pastor, he started every Sunday school class out. Anybody got any answered prayers to share? And there was 3 straight weeks that we was in that Sunday school class, and 3 straight weeks there was not one answered prayer that was shared. Now I'm certain that it wasn't because God wasn't answering prayer. It was just because people weren't recognizing it and giving God glory for it. But I was sitting here thinking about answered prayers, of how God does that and works in mercies. So keeping our eye on the needs that we continue to pray for, but also giving thanks and glory for the things that he has answered in this. This here, a dramatic answer to prayer because the church did what it was supposed to do. And I think we would see more of that if we did what we were supposed to do. So in Acts chapter 12, verse 1, let's read this account of the great prayer meeting and the great answer to prayer that of Peter being released. Now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church. And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. And then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, delivered him to a group of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer, now again, this is one of the great verses that I've marked and held on to all these years, but prayer was made occasionally, periodically, haphazardly, frequently, without ceasing, of the church unto God for him. And so when Herod would have brought him forth, that same night Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in that prison. And he smote Peter on the side, and he raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird yourself, bind on your sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast your garment about you, and follow me. So he went out, and he followed him, and he wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought that he saw some vision. And so when they were past the first and the second ward, they came to the iron gate that leads unto the city, which opened to them of his own accord. And they went out, and they passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And so when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of a surety that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. And so when they had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken, named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said unto her, Thou art mad. But she constantly affirmed that it was even so. So then said they, It is his angel. But Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But he, beckoning unto them with the hand to hold their peace, declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, Go show these things unto James and to the brethren. And he departed and went unto another place. Now as soon as it was day, and there was no small stir among the soldiers what was become of Peter, and when Herod had sought for him and found him not, he examined the keepers and commanded that they should be put to death. And he went down from Judea to Caesarea, and there he abode. Now read the judgment on Herod now for what he did in killing the brother of John and trying to kill Peter. And so Herod was highly displeased with them of Tyre and Sidon, but they came with one accord to him, and having made Blastus the king's chamberlain their friend, desired peace, because their country was nourished by the king's country. And upon a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat upon his throne, made an oration unto them, and the people gave a shout, saying, It is the voice of a God, and not of a man. And immediately the angel of the Lord smote him, because he gave not God the glory. And he was eaten of worms, and he gave up the ghost. But the word of God grew and multiplied. And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and they took with them John, whose surname was Mark. A lot of activity there, a lot of going on, but boy, I'm telling you, you can't read these chapters in the book of Acts and not get a little bit of excitement with that, is to say, man, dismiss. Too many in the church today dismiss, well, that was the book of Acts. I remember young in the ministry, and I remember sitting in Baptist pastors' groups talking about that which was, but that which is no more. I used to listen to Baptist preachers say, well, that was the book of Acts, the Spirit of God was there. We don't have the same spirit of intensity and those kind of things. We are like the people that was in the house of Mary. Peter stands at the door knocking, answered to the prayer, and they did what? Dismissed it. Called her, you're crazy. You're mad. I'm telling you, he's at the door. And nobody had sense enough to get up and go check. You know, the idea of this is that they got the answer to the prayer, but they are still filled with unbelief because the prayer was answered. That's foolishness, isn't it? But how often is it today that when the church is praying for something, that they do not see the answers to prayer that God is giving to them? About 6 months ago, last year mainly, I kept bringing before you on Monday nights the world map that I have, and I kept bringing before you Venezuela. You know, 1 million people, refugees, trying to get out of the country. No food on the shelves. No money in the economy and the system there. Great persecution going on. A dictator there. There was just, people running for their lives. Missionaries, our Christian missionaries at the borders, trying to feed these people, trying to minister to these people. These people would get a basket of food or a bag of food, and they would have to go back into the country to give to their family who couldn't make it out. And so you just had this continual thing of death, destruction. And again, those two terms, death and destruction, is the very signs that you're looking for, is to say that's Satan's activity. This thing of infanticide that we're talking about and that we prayed against, of death and destruction, that's the work of hell. That's the work of our enemy. God said, I am the giver of life. I choose life. I create life. I am life. So you see the opposite of that, death and destruction, that's the hand of God. that we see there of Satan's activity going against the things of God with that. So in this, we see these things happening and unfolding because the church did what it was supposed to do, pray. Now again, you go back to Acts chapter 1, chapter 2, and you see, wait in Jerusalem until you be endued with power from on high. Now the church doesn't want to do that today because we don't wait. We're not good waiters, are we? I'm not. You know, my idea of time and that is like, right, let's get. She had her ball game and got out of Kaiser late, and every quarter of a mile, I got behind one of them law-abiding citizens that like to go to speed limit. It makes my waiting, my frustration grow in that. And I got there 3 minutes to spare. So what could I say? Thank you, Lord. Again, the lessons of understanding God's timing, God's will and way in this. That Marie Monson book that I keep referring to, that I've told you about over the weeks, every night when I read that thing, another answer prayer is that she just waited upon the Lord. The one that I read the other night, Friday night, she was supposed to go to a Bible conference. This is the woman that was a missionary over in China back in the Great Rebellion that was going on in the early 1900s. And this was long before communism broke out, but it was trying to get an inroads at that particular time in the 1920s and 30s. But she was supposed to go to this Bible conference for women at a city that was up 20 miles up the road. But there are all these bandits and all these thieves, and harm's way was there. And the Spirit forbade her and said, do not go. And so when she said, okay, I'll obey the Spirit, she didn't go. And she was greatly grieved because she wasn't able to go be a part of the Bible conference. That the word came back was that the bandits had raided the city. They had taken missionaries, had taken women that was part of that Bible thing, and had taken them as hostages. And so this group that was still remaining with her, these other Christians that were there, they did the thing that church is supposed to be doing today. What?
Pray.
They prayed. And so they prayed and fasted. They fasted all day. They prayed all night and all day. And the word came that for no expected reason, guess what the bandits had done? Released all the hostages, turned everybody loose, and they'd gone back up into the hills and the mountains to mind their own business. Now that was just a freak of accident, right? That was just a coincidence. That was just a karma. People want to use that word so frequently in the church today. God forgive us. It was a divine answer to prayer. God's people prayed, and again, Jeremiah 33:3. Jackie's not here, so the rest of you got to pick up the slack. What's the verse? Call unto me, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things which thou knowest not. James had been killed. Now this is James and John, the sons of Zebedee, the first, one of the close inner circle, Peter, James, and John, the close friends of Jesus while he was there. And the reason I have to tell you that is because a lot of people ask me about, well, in verse 17, James is mentioned again. Well, that's not James, the one that was killed back in verse 1 or 2. That was James, the brother of Jesus. Okay? James, the brother of Jesus, was the leader, spiritual leader of the church at this particular time in Jerusalem. As we see, Peter's having to hide, kind of keep a low key because he's got a target on his back as being the number one Christian. And so now you got Herod, you got the Jews, and they're still trying to kill all the Christians because they had crucified Christ. His blood was on their hands, and they wanted to silence these Christians. And you see that in all the earlier chapters of the book of Acts, is that they beat them, they imprisoned them, and they tried to stop them from preaching the name of Jesus. Why is the Chinese government arresting those people, targeting those people, shutting down that church? Why is it that the Democrats just initiated a law to say that they do not want to take an oath in the House of Representatives or in the Senate or in any other government position and swear in the name of God to uphold and to keep, or put their hand on the Bible. They're doing the same thing. They are trying to remove God in the name of Christ from all existence in society. The church continues to sit around twiddling their thumbs, playing tiddlywinks. Guess what? They're going to do it. Because the church won't do what it's supposed to do. Call prayer meeting. And get serious about being serious about the most serious thing in all the world. God's kingdom. And so this church, with this great need, Peter was now arrested. James had been killed. And we see is that we don't want Peter to die. Now, they were willing to die. They knew that they might die. Peter knew that because in John chapter 21, the last chapter of that is that we read is that Jesus said, in your last days, you will be led to that which where you do not want to go. In other words, he died. You read in the Fox's Book of Martyrs is that Peter, that they tried to crucify him as they crucified Christ, and he said, I am not worthy to be crucified as my master. And so they flipped him upside down, and he was crucified upside down. Now that's the historical account in the book of Fox's Book of Martyrs. And you read that of the 11 apostles, disciples, not counting Judas Iscariot, of course, but the 11 original disciples, all of them died. 10 of the 11 died brutal, horrible deaths. And the only one that didn't die was John. And so, for whatever reason, John was preserved. But again, we read in Revelation, where was he? On the island of Patmos in captivity. He had been boiled in oil at one point, so all of his skin had been flayed from him at one point. And what he lived to be old, or what's the term? Well-stricken in years. Well-stricken in years, but he's still persecuted. And we have to understand this. This is the day and the time that we're in. Satan owns this world and the minds of people. And they are assaulting and attacking the good things that we've always enjoyed and always taken for granted. And they ain't always going to be. This Bible that we can openly read and have and teach and gather and all that, it's not always going to be this way. Our times are coming. And so it is while we have time that we ought to be conscious about the things of God and the needs that are at hand. And so when those needs come, we respond like the church. Hey, Peter's been arrested. Hey, Herod's going to kill him like they killed James. And the church, with their minds, say, well, we'll see about that. So they get together in Mary's house and they begin to pray and they begin to cry out to God. God hears, and God does what? He answers. And he does it in a miraculous fashion. Now, to those, as I said, those Baptist preachers that said, oh, well, that's the book of Acts. That was when the Holy Spirit was thicker and heavier upon the church, and it's not that way today. Over in China, there is a young man, or a middle-aged man, called Brother Yun, or Yun. I don't know exactly the right pronunciation on that. But he was the same thing. He was a preacher of the gospel. He was arrested. He was put in jail. And one particular night, an angel came to him, woke him up, and he walked right out of a maximum security jail in China. He was up in Lancaster or Gettysburg, Pennsylvania here last year, and I hated that I missed the opportunity, but I would love to have gone up and to heard this guy. But the same thing that happened to Peter happened to him. Not in the first church, but in the 2000s, in our time frame. And again, we come to this understanding that those Baptist preachers that I was talking about in opening are wrong. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the same things that we read of in the Bible are the same things that God is able to do today in you and me, when we do it God's way. Now, I read that in the book of John, and it's a promise. In the book of John, it says, and Jesus speaking here, and Jesus says, the things that I've done, so also shall you do, and greater things than these, because I go to my Father, which is in heaven. So all those books that I've got, of miracles, and revivals, and power, and spirit, and great things that God did, testimonies and biographies, and all those things, it is a living testimony to me is that when God's people do what God says to do in the Word of God, is that God does the same thing in response. There's a great need. There's a great cry out there today. Hey, Peter's been taken, and his life is in jeopardy. Suicides, as I've said, have escalated right off the charts. There is a great need. Do you hear this? Is this prayed about in churches? Is this mentioned in people's lives today? Pray! No. Well, let some counselor do it. Well, mental illness. Well, dieting and environment and everything. Pray! I attack when I pray these things about suicide because I don't know who the next one's going to be. But I'm telling you this much, if my son sitting here is saying in his mind, saying, I think I'm going to take my life because life just isn't worth living anymore and it's hopeless and it's dark and I'm just going to end all this thing. I as a Christian, I as a pastor, I as a father, I have a responsibility just to say, oh, well, that's his choice. Well, pray and intercede. Take that demon thought out of his mind like a scalpel. Cut it out. Didn't Jesus pray that for us in John 17? Deliver them from evil. Is that not an evil? Are you praying it? Do you go into the mind, the heart, and the soul of men, women, and children that you love who have demonic thoughts? I read about that woman that was out there. She was a blogger, 27 years old in San Francisco. This was what, again, this happened Wednesday. She committed suicide. She was ran this business. She put a suicide note on her blog. People read that, went to her house to do a well check. Went in, did a well check, found her dead. She wrote a suicide note. She was 27 years old, and she said, the dark thoughts that I have had for 10 years. So in other words, this started when she was 17 years old. I will now bring to pass. 10 years she was tormented. 10 years she was demonically attacked until finally in 10 years she did what? Follow through with it. You don't think Satan doesn't come and whisper to people? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Nobody cares. Where was the church? Not one Christian got to her. Not one church delivered her. Now, in my mind, in my examination of this, I often think of people that's got this smile on their face when you say to them, how are things? And they say, oh, everything's fine. You know, that's the reason I play that game with people with cashiers and whatnot. Have a nice day, really? I play that game to get them to think about what they're saying because we are programmed. How you doing? Oh, everything's okay. And everything ain't okay. Man, I really throw them for a loop when they'll say, how are you doing tonight, sir? I'm miserable. Oh, okay. Well, have a good day. I just said I'm miserable. How am I going to have a good day if I'm miserable? And they give up. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to say in that. But even though people don't say it, the heart is desperately wicked. Out of the heart proceeds these things of sin and evil. There is a void of God, Ichabod. God has departed. Satan owns them. He afflicts them. The drug addicts are crying out what? Give me more and more and more. And all the studies now are coming out. They're all coming out now. After all the things that they said, oh, it doesn't affect you. Now it's coming out. It affects the psychosis within the heart and within the minds of people today, that they become violent and that they become these agitated. They lose all the nervous system, and all that is being attacked. It's all coming out. Which we already knew. I didn't need anybody to prove that to me. Oh, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me. Well, guess what? Yes, it does. Altars. And demonic minds. Gotta have it, gotta have it. Alcoholics, gotta have it, gotta have it. Sex trafficking today on the Super Bowl Sunday, 4 times as many. And I read they arrested in California, they arrested almost 3 dozen sex traffickers that were getting ready to do this for the Super Bowl celebration. And you think of these girls and boys that have been picked up, that have been swept away from the life that they knew, chained, prisons, cellars. And they're crying out, is there anybody that cares anymore? Is this what the rest of my life is going to be? And almost all of them never see the age of 40 when they come out of that, because they can't deal with the guilt and the shame and the horror that they had to live in when they was 15 years old or 20 years old. And can you blame them? Did anybody care? And the church is supposed to have the love of God, the compassion of God, ought to be like Jesus when he looked at the masses and the multitudes. What did he do? And he had compassion on them. And he met the need. Peter is in jail. Peter is going to die. There is a crisis. And there is a crisis on our land. And it's in the homes. And it's in the minds. And it's in the hearts. And here in you I with the greatest thing. My hope is built on Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not claim any other name but the name of above all names, the name Jesus. The light of the world, which is Jesus, comes and floods out the darkness. He was in prison. There was no light. It was at midnight. And an angel showed up and the light shined in the darkness. And everyone that has ever been born again knows what that moment was like. I was in darkness and the light shone. Jesus showed up. And in this, it is the same thing for families. It is the same thing for individuals. It is the same thing for our nation. May the light of Christ shine in this darkness of today. But you see, how did it happen? And they stretched out. But prayer was made without ceasing. And R.A. Torrey, in one of the biographies that I read of him, he said the church stretched out. They stretched out without ceasing, clawing at the throne of God, and they would not be denied. That's that prevailing, persistent prayer that I always talk about, where prayer is made. Well, I don't feel like praying today. And old Roy Fish said that statement. He said, you pray when you feel like it. You pray when you don't feel like it. You pray until you do feel like it. Hannah, there's another t-shirt for you to make. That's what this thing is. Make a t-shirt. We're going to sell them. $9.95. You can buy Dan Biden little catch sales. And there's a lot of people in the church today that don't feel like praying. So they do what? They don't. There is no greater sin and sorrow in my heart than all the times that God's Spirit beckoned me to pray. And I said, no. Let me finish this movie. Got chores to do. Got to run here. Got to run there. We have been doing that for so long that the house of God has been forsaken. People did not think today was Sunday, the Lord's Day. They didn't care about going to the house of God to worship God. They didn't care about the man of God preaching the word of God. They don't care. The Bible. I read a chapter to you. One chapter. Out of almost 1,200 chapters in the Bible, I read one to you. Took me, what, 3 minutes, 4 minutes to read that? 25 verses? That is more Bible than what some people have read all week. Because this book has been like this all week. I went around taking a little thing, getting all the cobwebs from this past week of being zero and having to keep that bad boy going so much, and cobwebs, and I could see them all, and so I took that little duster and I said, that reminds me of a lot of people's prayer closets, the cobwebs. Bible is neglected. The house of God is forsaken. Suicides are escalating. Drug epidemic is upon us. The cancers are multiplying. Souls are lost and perishing. They're passing laws of infanticide now, and the church is doing what? Wear your favorite football jersey. Bring your favorite dip. We're going to watch the Super Bowl. It's not a time for eat, drink, and be merry. It's a time to weep and wail and cry, stretch outwardly unto the Lord to say, we're in trouble. I need you every hour, especially this hour. You and I, not only for ourselves, and not only for one another, but for those that are on your heart and mind today that you know they got up this morning without Christ. They are lost. Their souls are in trouble. Their eternity is hastening on. And soon, very soon, like Herod, And an angel of the Lord smote him because he did not give God the glory. And the worms ate him from the inside out, and he died right on the spot. Horrible, horrible death, wasn't it? But who is that you and I know today, that God, who holds their breath in his hands, is ready to say, this is your last day? Time's up. And they ain't ready. They're not ready. I need you, Lord, because my loved one's lost. And another week has passed. And the first month of this year has gone. And they're still not saved. Over in the book of Jeremiah, there's that little verse there in Jeremiah 8:20, another great memory verse. Put this one on the coffee cup and get it to Jackie so she can memorize this one. The harvest is past, the summer has ended, and we are not saved. We are not saved. That's a horrifying verse, but that's our nation. That's our community. And you and I, with the gospel, go into the four corners of the earth and bring light in their darkness. Bring hope to their hopelessness. Pray without ceasing. Stretch outwardly for God to do what only God can do. And the power of God to be demonstrated once again, just like it was here in the book of Acts. Same God, same answer to prayer, same mercies. It's because God is the same. He changes not.